Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to the biggest freewheeling live streaming poetry podcast on the planet. So glad you could join me. Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. And I know you do too, because you're sitting here. So please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Whatever you can do to help spread poetry around the internet would be much appreciated. And I'm serious, though. Please do click on the like button and share it. Make sure you're subscribed. All that stuff really helps. It really does. Let's go first, though, as we always do, to our Sunday poet. We have two poets today. It was one of those, we've been getting slammed with poems, given all that's going on in the world, like 300 plus poems every week for Poets Respond. We've got a bonus poem for you, but let's go first to today's poet, Elizabeth Twiddy, and here she is. Hey, Elizabeth, how you doing?
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be here. And so you wrote an interesting thing. And the thing that's going on right now, which we talk about every week at this point, is that, you know, there's so much going on politically right now, but it's so hard to write political poems. And by that, I mean make actual art out of politics. And I think the problem is we have such strong opinions about politics that sort of gets in the way of creativity and that kind of energy you need. And you took two things that seemed unrelated and put them together, which is a great idea for a way to get past that problem. Both a heartbreaking story and then the thoughts about Elon Musk that we're all contemplating right now. So tell us how this poem, Considering Starlink, came to be.
How did the poem come to be? I think that you said a lot of it already, but I will try to expand on it a little bit. I, as you mentioned, had been thinking a lot about Elon Musk's role in our lives and concerned about the surprising and sudden amount of power that he is occupying on our political landscape and in our society right now. So that is something I've been thinking a lot about. Trying to understand its implications and ramifications for all of us, not just in the United States, but in the world as a whole, and in the sort of planetary sense, and also in the sort of extraplanetary sense potentially. And so thinking about that sort of in the background all the time. And then my husband one day last week brought to my attention a local newspaper story that he had just been reading and crying about. And I said, "What are you crying about? You know, what's wrong?" And he said, "You got to read this story." And I read this story about these two young siblings who died in a simple slip of the steering wheel on the way to school in the morning, one morning. And this young woman was just about to start college in the fall. Her little brother, 15 years old, playing the clarinet and baking. And they're both gone in an instant in a simple car crash. And it occurred to me that these two things were related, and I was interested to try to understand how. And that's how this poem came to be. And it ended up being a sonnet, and I think it's a love poem to the two young people who lost their lives in this absurd moment of real life that happens to all humans all the time, everywhere on the planet, and to try to understand how does that connect with the larger scope of what's happening with power. And yeah.
Yeah, well, really well said. Do you want to read the poem?
Sure. Considering Starlink, while we tussle with thoughts of Elon Musk, of Earth, the moon and Mars, our particles adrift, the stars and satellites that light our paths, our little lives are blinking on and off. Along a stretch of snowy road to school, a slip and crash that stops the heart from one beat to the next, and two young people gone. It happens all the time, we know, how easily it goes, and how the sun still keeps its place, and Saturn glints, and watches tick on miracles of skin, around the tender orbits of our wrists, unconcerned with immortality, lucky, unlucky, lucky, unlucky, lucky.
Yeah, beautiful sonnet there. Thanks so much for sharing that, Elizabeth. And you mentioned in the email that you're relatively new to coming back to poetry. So tell us just really quickly. I'm interested in why that is, and how why you're making poetry a part of your life again.
Oh my goodness, that was an unexpected question for sure. I'm going to try my best to let you into my head. Wow. So for the past more than 15 years, I've been doing, I had a book published in 2010, a full-length book published, and it got some nice attention and it was fun. And I found myself holing up after that and really wanting to take a giant breath and understand with some perspective what my life was all about, and not just follow this sort of momentum and inertia that automatically comes with something that happens in any of our lives. This sort of way that human life tends to go and the way our brains seem to work. And so I started asking myself a million questions, lots of questions, that's really it. Asking myself a lot of questions and thinking a lot about thinking and what is thought. And, if I were in solitary confinement and I weren't even in contact with another sentient being, isn't thought still an action? Because the thinker is part of the universe, and that shift in the universe that happens inside of the thinker. So just thinking, well, why do I need to move those thoughts outside of myself? Why do I need to manifest something? Why do I need to make something? Why do I need to share something with someone outside of myself? What does that do? What does that accomplish? And one of the answers is it's something I can do. I can't do a lot of things. There are a lot of things I can't do, but this is something that I can do. And if I'm lucky, I'll live at the most another 40 or 50 years. And, sort of the limit of a human life, so somewhere between one day from now and maybe 50 years from now, I will die. And well, what am I going to do with that time? And how can I potentially give something positive and help somebody outside of myself in a way that's not just about me, in a way that's not just about a Google knowledge panel or how do we see ourselves after we die, and, worrying about what our lives are coming to. So I'm hoping to get to a place where I can make something, manifest something, and move it outside of myself into the world and into someone else's brain and help somebody else.
Yeah. Well, I think you just did with this poem, which has reached a lot of people, and probably, will reach the parents of the people who tragically died. That's happened before with Poets Respond. And I was curious about that question just because for me too, I published a book around the same time and then went a long time not writing either. So I was kind of just personally curious about that. But thanks so much for sharing that and that explanation too, Elizabeth. It's great that you're back. I'm glad you're writing poetry again and hope you come back soon.
Well, thank you. I'd love to hear more about your experience too, but I understand the time situation.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. Well, let's talk about it later. But thanks so much. Yeah. Take care, Elizabeth.
You too. Thanks.
Yeah, that was Elizabeth Twiddy with her poem, today's poem, Considering Starlink at Rattle.com. And now we're going to go to an extra poem, which we have this week by Seth Peterson. It's Seth's second time in Poets Respond recently. He had a poem a few weeks ago as well. And here he is, Seth Peterson. Hey, Seth, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. Yeah, so your poem, which no one's read yet, this is one of those surprise, poems that's coming out on Tuesday. And this is Sea Devil, which is one of those articles that very haunting video that I happen to see too ahead of your poem. A few people wrote poems about it. Tell us what it was that you wrote about this week.
No, I don't know how you could not write a poem about this. This is one of those things you see I'm just always fascinated by these just natural stories, whether it's, they discover a new planet, a new star, something So every once in a while, just as a prompt, I'll go into like Scientific American's webpage and look for stuff. And so this is something that popped up. I don't know if you hadn't seen the story. If you are probably familiar with an anglerfish, and that's one of a few names for this fish. The sea devil or black sea devil is another name for this fish. But they live in complete darkness at the bottom of the ocean. There's zero light. And last week, for the first time ever, according to the article I read, they saw one swim up into the light before it died. So it was the first time they've ever seen one alive at the surface, and it happened to be at the Canary Islands, which would be a good spot to swim to if you were just about to die.
Yeah, and so so that people were seeing on the screen that black sea devil, also known as the anglerfish, really terrifying. And one of the things that's always interesting about those, I always thought they were like tiny. I assumed it was maybe like a softball size, and it just looks. No, these can be like 4 feet, 4 feet of terror. And so so this seeing this fish emerge from the depths, and you just knew a poem had to come from it, right?
Yeah, just fascinating. I mean, just that fish in general, if you've seen it, super interesting. It has that little bioluminescent lure, and then, it has the really sharp teeth. But in the poem, I refer to it as a she, and that's because it's one of these fish that has this dimorphism, that's called. So the female of the species is huge, and the male is just this little tiny version of a fish.
Yeah, and what's fascinating too about this poem, and we'll hear it in just a second, is that it feels like the whole thing can be a metaphor for something about the current, zeitgeist too. There's something. Did you have that in the back of your mind, or did that come out, or something you're even unaware of? I mean, how much were you thinking about current events and the state of the world when you were writing this poem?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like all of us. I think that's probably below the surface. But I guess it wasn't something I was consciously doing. So I always love hearing that about the poems.
Yeah, well, very cool. Let's hear it now. Want to go ahead and read it?
Yeah. Sea Devil. It was not curiosity so much as a calling that brought the fish paddling up through the gradient of ocean. The hideous yaw of her mouth opened as if in astonishment, exposing the rows and rows of teeth pointed like beliefs she hadn't yet questioned. Her eyes were like sequins pinned in place, her skin tarnished gray with soot from the ovens of something hellish, which she must have known to be cold and black and infinite. I can't imagine how she lived with that dim green light always burning, always unreachable, no matter how hard she swam for it. Her ridged, disheveled body, like something that had slipped its shackles and sprinted, as an earthworm does to rain. How it must have felt to see the depths recede and that bluish-green dream world emerge. The sifting light, the silt and bubbles exploding like miniature galaxies. Those who saw her say her ash-colored body glistened. Her thin fins looked like wings. Watching her spin was like watching a fallen angel ascending to heaven. Does that mean she was happy? And when the devil nears his end, will he also rise like a fish? Will the light call him like a bell behind a doorway? Or will it wait there in silence for someone or something to open it?
Yeah, beautiful poem. Beautiful tribute to that fish and that really haunting, fascinating image of this sea devil by Seth Peterson. Thanks so much for sharing that, Seth. Thanks for being here. And that'll be the poem of the day on Tuesday.
Thanks, Sam.
Yep, thanks. Yeah, once again, that was Seth Peterson with Sea Devil. If you're not subscribed to our poem of the day, all you have to do is go to rattle.com. There's a sign-up link at the bottom of every page. Just sign up. You'll get that poem on Tuesday in your inbox, along with Seth's reading of it, like we do with a new poem every day. So make sure you do that. We just hit 25,000 subscribers on the Daily Poem, which is a lot of fun. So make sure you're one of them. All right, and now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Todd Robinson. So sit tight, and we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Todd Robinson. Todd, affectionately known as the Toddfather, is a poet and educator based in Omaha. He's the author of Mass for Shut-ins, which is right here. Also, Note at Heart Rock. He's recipient of the 2012 Thompson Learning Community's Outstanding Faculty Award and has conducted writing workshops all over the Midwest. He's also founder and host of the Kaneko Art Museum's Bibliophilia reading series. He earned a BA and MA from Creighton University and a Ph.D. from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He serves as vice president, too, on the board of directors at Big Fields Lab. And here he is, Todd Robinson. Hey, Todd, how you doing?
Hi, Timothy. I'm wonderful. I'm with you. I'm in the internet. We're being beamed to Saturn and beyond. Is that true?
That really is. We're all over the place, even beyond, into the Oort cloud. We're blasting off.
The Oort cloud. Dude, thank you. All I can say is thank you.
All right. So do you want to start out right away with a poem?
I will. Let's bring this back to Earth. Let's get terrestrial. This is called Mouthful of Flowers. I'm not the best person in town or anyone's favorite, but I came home to Omaha from the farm and never left. My partner didn't cry at her father's funeral, even though it was snowing on the ancient seabed from which he had coaxed alfalfa to feed all the miserable cows. It was weird to wash the smoke out of his curtains without him there to drink and dance with. It's been so long since I dropped an ice cube down his shirt. It feels like it never happened. I guess it didn't to most people. So I gushed in my rumpled suit, ancient seas pouring from me for his melodramatic bruises, the way he knew my nickname but not my name, webbed as he was in those intravenous cables he thought were cobwebs. Even as I became a priest of grief, I flayed myself with guilt. It wasn't my father reduced to a jar's shape. Memories amber, Catholic church stoop, a hearse mouth full of flowers.
Yeah, and that was Mouthful of Flowers, a newer poem from Todd Robinson. And so, Todd, the first thing I'd like to know, because I noticed the first time I think you sent in poems, your website, Toddfather, which is really fun. But I'm wondering, where does that nickname come from? Why are you the Toddfather?
Well, Timothy, with a name like Todd, no disrespect to my parents who might be on this experience with us on the way to the Oort cloud. No disrespect, but Todd, it's a little vanilla, and I like to joke that it's actually short for Toddbert. But yeah, so man, we're poets. We got to be repping. Like there's just we are large. We contain multitudes. So. It was sort of a goofy self-deprecation at first, probably under the influence of some beers, and then it sort of picked up its own momentum, like a snowball rolling down a hill, and it kind of got bigger and bigger, and now it's kind of inescapable. So when it came time to make my own website, what else could I do?
Well, that makes sense. So how long have you been a poet? Like, is it something that you always wanted to do, or did you discover it at a certain point?
I think it was probably the high school, Edgar Allan Poe, Emily Dickinson. I liked it. Bleak. It seemed, I don't know, Pink Floyd lyrics. I wanted to do what they did because, man, that struck a chime in me that nothing else could. Something really deep inside, subterranean selfhood. And I did love language. I loved reading novels and plays and. So it was bending language into shapes that I hadn't seen it bend before. But I don't think I wrote a poem of any merit until probably my master's program. And that wasn't in a class. I was studying literature. I wasn't studying to be a poet. But I had always loved the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. And so I wrote a kind of parody of Prufrock. And so I wrote like a 200-line poem, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, and it's got that sort of template of Prufrock, so it's bouncing all over the place, and it's from this kind of exaggerated persona, and I can get down with that. I'm the Toddfather, so I like exaggerated personas, and it takes in culture. It sort of looks both at a granular selfhood level and also this kind of cosmopolitan political aspect and cultural milieu, and I just had a lot of fun with it. Like I'm never going to publish that poem, but man, I felt like I was flying when I was writing it, and that's what I live for. Whether you're flying deeper into the self or out into the Oort cloud, that's a good place to be for me.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time you mentioned Poe and Emily Dickinson in high school? Do you remember the first time you had that feeling of being deeper, of like sort of being smacked into another layer of consciousness? And then the follow-up to that, I'm wondering, is the experience for you of writing the same? That time you wrote the T.S. Eliot parody poem, did you feel the same thing you felt, creating something as you did reading Poe or in Dickinson?
Great question. It was different because the Eliot parody, that in particular, it's like you're assembling a giant puzzle from like all sorts of disparate pieces. So I'm looking at his lines and I'm trying to layer mine over the top and, bringing in scraps of culture. I mentioned the band Ween, in the poem. So I'm just kind of grabbing all these bits and trying to make them cohere, which I suppose is a pretty fitting metaphor for writing poems now, because I often start like right back here. There's a chair back here with my laptop. It's not very glamorous, I'm kind of, trying to read a little bit, and then I'm trying to sort of be still, to slow down a little bit. I'm looking out the window. I'm not thinking be contemplative, be deep or whatever, but I'm just trying to like let the chatter of the external world and my internal consciousness sort of settle down. Literally like looking at a tree, looking at the clouds, like just trying to be receptive to external and internal stimuli. But and so there are puzzle pieces, right? Like a scrap of a remembered line or a memory or an image that you're sort of stacking downward on the page, digging into the page. But how is it different from that reading experience? It's a lot less certain, right? I mean, when I'm reading Dickinson or Poe or Diane Seuss for that matter, or Elizabeth, that you just had on, that brilliant poem, I'm in their hands mostly, So, and typically these are pieces that have been worked on, published, they're very mature and ready to go, and so I'm just being lulled by the master's hand, if you will. Where in my poems, I'm wrenching and lurching, but also floating. I contradict myself, I think, Timothy. Does any of this make sense?
Well, I think it does. I mean, I don't know. There is this sort of, when you read a great poem, there's this spark of understanding of somebody else, right? That you kind of get. But then you kind of get that, I think, when you write your own poems too, because it's like the other self that you forget you are or something, that you're like, oh yeah, like it's like the Emily Dickinson inside of you that you like tap into for a second when it works and you're not fooling yourself, which is really easy to do, pretending it's working when it's not. But when it works, it really is tapping into like being in tune with someone else, even if that someone else is internal, I guess I would say. And so, I don't know, I'm just always really curious about why we do this thing that we do,
Yeah, that's gold. And I love the way you put that. I mean, and we do have mini selves. They're receding from us in time. They're not always accessible to us. When I'm depressed and my goofy self is deep down in the bunker somewhere in the labyrinth, right? Yeah, dictated by mood, biochemistry, news, whatever. Food, man, that's a really nice point. And that's helpful for me to think about as a writer, that I'm accessing a sort of a different side of myself, a more contemplative side, a more maybe purposeful side, learned side or whatever. But it's not just one side, that there are all these possible selves waiting to be reached, accessed, remembered, recalled, interrogated. And of course, any non-poets are going, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And maybe you do know. Maybe that's just yourself that's telling you don't know.
Yeah, well, there's something about like, helping us to be self-actualized. I don't even know exactly what that word means, but it feels like just being in touch with ourselves is so important. And we do that through poetry. I was, we have a mutual friend, Eric Campbell, who said you should be a guest because you're great. And And so I was looking up your readings, and your readings are fascinating. I saw there's two on YouTube that I found. And it is like two different personas. Like between the poem, you're like talking and joking around, and then the poem gets serious. And so you get to see these both sides. And it's just there's such an interesting contradiction and comparison between the two. It's like this is the self that I'm performing and entertaining you, and then here we get serious, and then we get to and it goes back and forth between those two versions of you, which are always there and always in all of us. And I think maybe that's the reason why poetry is so important, is because we get to explore the different layers of ourselves and get to know them, when for most people sadly walking around, they don't know the different layers themselves. They're stuck in the one that they're confronted with in the mirror every day, I guess.
The one in the mirror, and the one that they, Eliot himself said, the face that you have to wear, right? The face you prepare to wear for the other faces or something. So that face that is sort of safe, that like maybe you're terrified under it, but no one's going to see that. And you diagnosed me beautifully. I'm not a subtle person. I don't think it's difficult to diagnose me. I won't give you too much credit, but it's true. And even today, I was like, I was nervous. I've never spoken with you. We've emailed, and you're charming, and I've seen your work, which is marvelous. But I thought, no, it's cool. I'll just power through it. I'm the Toddfather. I'll be glib and funny, and everything will be fine. And then you were like, well, why don't you read Mouthful of Flowers first? And I'm like, okay, everyone ready for a heartbreakingly sad poem about grief and death? and that is me. Those are my sides, and they're both seem so extreme. I mean, they really do. Like I'm a manic madman seeking delight, madcap goofball, and kind of depressed and introspective, and a little morose. So, and somehow, I've moved into this place where the poems become more a vessel for that side a little bit more than the playful side. Certainly the ones I sent you tonight, just to warn everyone. I don't know. It's such a mysterious art form that I can't really say. Fruit of chance. Who knows who's in charge?
Yeah. Well, let's hear another one of those poems. What do you want to read next, Todd?
Yeah, buddy. Let's do Dream House Sutra. I'm in the Dream House. It's right behind me. I think I wrote it in that very chair back there, so it seemed appropriate to read since we're in the podcast space. Dream House Sutra. How lonely my perfect mansion, even with Pigpen yowling on the monolithic stereo, even dancing in a blue velour tracksuit with 2 lungs full of summer, sparrows cutting in line at the bird bath. How resentment curdles the milk, spoils the view. The new neighbor seems a chump through his picture window, jumping before a giant television. I am also a fan of sports, but keep the blinds sensibly drawn. Most people find me charming, but their regard only fed my sushi joint bathroom trip, a house key full of cocaine, Argentina crackling. Love light burbles on and on and on. I poke through the fridge, cupboards, closets, my grin tighter than the governor's. I vacuum under the recliner, alphabetize spices, graze the stranger. Amazon rings the doorbell. Dog walkers and lawn crews, plumbers, lawn crews from every window. This was our dream house, is, but I'm a bird flitting a gilded cage, even if the mortgage is paid, yearning through stained glass windows for a glimpse of God. How tactful the plasterwork, woodwork, ironwork. How sensible to gut out backstrokes in the lap pool. Friends keep telling me I need a dog, something to love. But all that meat they eat, bad bongos for the biome. I reckon it'll just stay us and the dust mites. When we were young, we circled these blocks wanting. Now we're living here.
Yeah. There's another powerful one that was Dream House Sutra by Todd Robinson. And, I think so many of these poems, and for Mass for Shut-ins too. They're love poems and poems of loss too. And I think maybe to frame what we're going to be reading today, can you talk a little about what what the context for that is, what the situation is that you've been going through for the last several years?
Yeah, specifically, it's worth telling the story. It's worth starting at the beginning in this case. My wife was a physician, and we were on a trip to Mexico, and we were really riding high. We'd been sober a couple years. We were really thriving and kind of blooming, and we were having like a midlife renaissance. And we were checking into a hotel in Mexico, and the receptionist noticed that my wife had a little bit of blood on her shirt. She had a white blouse, and my wife, Cheryl, looked down to see what the receptionist was referring to, and there were a few drops of blood on her shirt, and then blood just started to kind of gush from her nose. And it didn't stop for about 12 hours. It just would not stop. So, we got back to the U.S., and took a lot of different kind of tests to kind of find out that she's got a host of symptoms, but it's kind of rooted in this mast cell deficiency and an immune deficiency. So she got shingles in 2 of her cranial nerves and got a traumatic brain injury from that. And then there's just this cascade of other effects, balance, dizziness, nausea, immune syndrome issues, migraines. So she quit working and she's housebound. And so it's a weird thing. It's not something that, that people can easily understand, like cancer or something, but it is absolutely disabling and debilitating, rare and strange. Mm-hmm. So yeah, my writing sort of naturally became, as my life became, sort of gotten this tunnel vision of looking at her and looking at us and looking at the incredible amount of loss associated with that, and also perseverance and growth, weirdly too, strange different kinds of growth. We went from thinking, that things are really going our way and the universe was really built for our knowledge and goodness and health and so on, and the universe is like, no, fools, here's a meteor. So that's the rough background there for you.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel biblical in the way that happens sometimes. Maybe I think it's a good time just to jump right into year 6, which is the poem from Rattle.
Yeah, thank you for welcoming this poem into your arms, Timothy. You're a special mortal. Year 6. The horizon rebuffed our hopes. She stopped going outside. Her bedroom blinds became tourniquets, tightening light to slits. Neighbors' homes were caves of flame. I counted with the owl. People still walked their snuffling dogs. Migrating doves brought record heat, red flag warnings. Winter down to 1 snow as she ate, slept, ached. Suns setting like alien things. Behind the house we painted hospital white. The blue bedroom where she fell and fell.
Yeah, and that was year 6 by Todd Robinson. And so going through such a tragedy, I mean, you dove into poetry very clearly to figure things out and to help heal your thoughts about what was going on. Did you ever, given the face of such heartbreak and difficulty, did you ever think poetry wasn't enough? Did you go through a phase where writing didn't seem worth it or something? Or did you always, find that solace in writing your thoughts down?
Good questions. I mean, on the one hand, I'll say no one thing is enough. Love alone isn't enough. I don't think poetry's not enough. Exercise isn't enough. Therapy's not enough. Friendship isn't enough. Like, not for me. I need all of it, and I need all of it a lot of the time. So that might just speak to some sickness I have, some existential unease or something. But anyway, yeah. As for poetry's role in this, it was and is an important place to put these feelings that I can't just sort of barf into the phone all the time talking to somebody. I also can't just sort of let them fester in me and sort of rot. They'll make me crazy. Yeah, so the poems, like I said in that note in Rattle, they're a way to kind of distill, to cleanse, to purify, to look at the feelings from lots of ways. They're also, in a weird way, this is kind of strange probably, but they're messages in a bottle that I sort of send to her so that she is able to see all of my response to her. Because, when someone tells you every day for 7 years, my head is killing me, I have vertigo, and it's a weird vertigo where if I step forward, I keep moving forward, even if my body stops. And I can always just say, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. What can I do? And, that may be heartfelt, but it loses its efficacy. So again, I can put a weird new poem in a bottle every day, every month, whatever, and float them to her. They're not always encouraging poems, I'm not maybe that kind of a writer. But she does regularly say how proud she is of me, and how she thinks in many ways my writing has been this weird beneficiary of her illness, because man, it's just so intense. It's such a profound experience, and it's so unnerving, and it's so deep, and it's yeah. Anyway, I don't know if I even answered your question.
No, I think you did. Would you say one of the things I always give people as advice is to try to write poems to somebody, or just imagine, even if it's an imagined somebody, even if you speaking the poem to somebody isn't you, as long as the poem is like somebody speaking to somebody, it has that kind of connective power that we get to listen in on these genuine, authentic feelings, I guess is what it is. And I think that's really where all poetry comes from, is that sort of desire to be writing to somebody and to speak, even if it's to God or whatever. So do you feel that way? Do you feel like you're writing all your poems to her now?
Very interesting. Again, so much of this process to me is somewhat mysterious. For somebody who's taught creative writing for 25 years, you'd think I'd have ready answers to every question, but I am really somebody who's kind of fumbling in the dark. So of course, if I think a poem has some, juice, if I think it's well written, well turned, moving, I want to share it. I don't share, 95% of what I write, because it doesn't get there. The language falters. It doesn't come together in satisfying ways. But I do want to share, and she's often been my first reader from before she was ill. I mean, we've been married a long, long time. We're partners. We're best friends. So I trust her so much, and she's more honest with me than a lot of people. So if I give her something and she'll read it and go, I'm like, okay, it's over. It's lost. It's unsalvageable. Things have changed with her illness. She's not as readily available for that, but yeah, I think I'm writing to her. And like I said, in encouragement, also in helplessness, I mean, it really is a way of saying, see that I am also hurting. See that the world is hurting. I wanted to ask you, and maybe you just already answered this question, why did you choose the poem? How many submissions do you get? 8,000 a day or something? And how did this one filter through all these layers and somehow reach your eyes?
Well, I mean, we read through poems, and then when we feel something, I feel like it feels to me like listening to a radio dial, one of those old fashioned ones, and you just hear static, static, static. And then you hit a station and it's like, there's this song. And then, so that's like the first read is you're just listening for some kind of song. And then when you hit a song, you listen to the song, and do you feel something, and that's pretty much it. And so if I feel something, I show it to, Alan and Katie and see if they feel something too. And if they do, we publish it. It feels like it's not even my choice. It's just what you could like hook yourself up to a lie detector test and just feel the different little bit of sweat, your little goosebumps or whatever that's detecting on your skin. They could just like glue your eyes open and force you to look at poems until you got that. And that's all. Maybe someday there'll be like an editor in like a test tube floating there having to stare at poems until they get some piezoelectric effect or whatever that is. But that really, I mean, we read it and it felt like the articulation of your emotion like came through. I don't know what that is. It's a real mystery to me too. I don't know if you read the interview in the last issue, or was it? Yeah, it was the issue you're in with Dean Radin, that parapsychologist. And, he is talking about maybe being some kind of quantum tunneling between the author's brain and your brain. And maybe that's why that subjective layer of poetry is there too. But I mean, maybe it's that you reached out through the cosmos and touched us with your words, it's just such a mystery. But there is like this undeniable feeling that you get when you read a great poem. And it's there. It's like physical and bodily and not really something that you can rationalize, I mean, that first read is like, does this person have control of language? Do they have the music of speech, which is something that we don't really teach and understand really well, but it's there, and that's really easy to read that first time through. But then there's that some extra special thing. And you wonder if it's like just your mood, if you had like too much coffee that day. And so that's why there's like layers and you see what, other editors think, but that's how it goes. So that poem, I could feel inside that there was something there,
I love that answer. I'm looking this way because I'm taking physical notes. I realize I could watch this podcast later, but I like to glean. I'm always out there, a little bumblebee getting the pollen, and I love that answer so much, Timothy. I love the radio dial metaphor, static to song. I think that's it exactly. And sometimes that's going to hit at 8 a.m. and sometimes it won't hit at all. And 4 p.m. it's different. But I want to be able to. That's why it's so inefficient to teach writing. I think it's crucial and important and doable, of course, but it can be difficult to sort of articulate what makes one poem work versus another. Look at this phrase, look at this image, how does this make you feel, etc. But yeah, that combination of clarity and mystery, but ultimately it comes down to effect, that some sort of little whisper went right through. I'm really honored to hear that answer and touched and delighted. Thank you.
Well, it's the second poem. We accepted a poem, you remember, a few years ago, and then you decided not to publish it, which is totally, it's rare. It stands out because it's rare people do that. But I wanted to say, I think this is a really important point too. If you get a poem accepted, anybody out there, and you feel like it's not right to publish it, like you change your mind, it's completely different to like throw it out in the world, not knowing what's going to happen. And then you realize it's going to be out there in the world. Like that it's the same thing like reading your poems live at a poetry reading or something makes you feel differently about the poems. If you get a poem accepted somewhere and you feel like it's not right, just say, hey, wait a minute, don't regret that later. No one's going to hate you. So I think it's really good advice and just something that's cool that you did. I think there's another great poem that we love hanging out there too, although these poems that we're reading today are great as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel super bad because I know there's a lot of hands on your time and it's Rattle. I've been reading Rattle for 20 years. And I remember in grad school, I read for Prairie Schooner. And so we had a whole wall of literary magazines and you guys were always there. And all these different magazines I was reading, Prairie Schooner and others, the writers I really liked, it seemed when I'd go to look at their contributor notes, they'd often say they were published in Rattle. And you talked about control of music of speech. I mean, you've got it in Rattle, right? It rattles. It's onomatopoeia. So I don't know. We're not going to sit here and create a mutual admiration society, buddy. But I do want to say that, again, that you've always been the kind of Mount Parnassus to me. So it's great to breathe the air up here. Thank you.
Oh, it's great to have you here. I want to talk about teaching and teaching poetry in particular, like you brought up earlier. But let's read another poem next, Todd.
All right. This is called Pine Wilt. February slinks through your nights. The windows dark with dreaming. Drought-broken winter in traction again. Soon you'll be an old man with hair like dirty snow. The yellow grass you used to daily shave given over to poems in the pale angles of your creviced face. Father and mother shuffled off to the great Greek restaurant in the ground where she drinks coffee black blood and his mustache cannot unfrown itself. Meanwhile, you put on pounds, watch the concrete birdbath crack and the crack lengthen, the peace lily wilting in its woven basket. Again, you fire up the dented kettle, watch cardinals fritter a backyard cherry tree. Her starlight and sing-song warmed these rooms for so long. Now she's gone. Moons drum over the vines where you scattered her coffee grounds. Water hisses, sirens warp the street. Soon summer will broil away the days you have left to count. Still time to clean the garage. So many square feet of forgetting. Call it good. Call it good enough.
Yeah, and that was Pine Wilt by Todd Robinson, another newer poem. So Todd, like we were saying, you've been teaching, you said, for decades. Do you think, first of all, do you think everybody can be a poet? That's one of the things I struggle with, because I want to believe that everybody is really a poet. and it's just a matter of, actually wanting to work, and maybe some people don't want to work enough, but if they did, they would be a poet. And I guess it gets into existential questions of, free will and whatnot. Like, can you choose not to want to work? But do you think everybody's a poet in there? Like, what's your experience with students? Do magical things sort of come out of everybody given enough time?
Yes, I think magical things do come out of everybody. It really is a matter of the amount of magic. So, some people in 16 weeks in a class, reading and writing, they're going to get about 2 inches of magic. They're going to get one phrase, and that's all they're going to be capable of for whatever reason. And other people are going to be like Diane Seuss and do, mountain ranges of magic. That's seems like all they do. I do believe, though, I think that they can certainly surpass themselves. I think anyone can surpass themselves. Maybe that's not that high to get up over. But I do think they can do something with language that, as you said, is musical, that makes us feel, that shows control, that is novel. They can all do it. Mm-hmm. So can they do it reliably? Very few, but they can do it. And when they can do it reliably, it's scary, yeah. That was ominous, perhaps. I was about to name a student's name who I think has that scary ability, and I thought that's probably inappropriate. So that's why I paused. It wasn't.
Yeah, there are a lot of HIPAA laws when it comes to poetry.
Yeah, so. Right? I'm like, whoa, easy, big fella. But I will quote a friend of mine who is not a student, but who's a brilliant writer and painter, Rebecca Roter. And she recently said, writing poems is a strange and tender art. And I love the way an odd and tender art. That's what it was. Yeah. And I thought, what a great way to frame it. It's not as direct as other forms of writing. But I will also say, I think generally students, man, I'm probably going to get fired, and I don't have tenure yet. I'm closing in, but I think generally speaking, students write better poems than they do fiction, which may be surprising because they're steeped in fiction. They're steeped in film and TV shows and often novels and video games, but fiction. Maybe we're all just so crammed with high quality fiction. I don't know. They can get to the poet. I can get them to the poetry.
Yeah. Well, how do you go about doing that? I guess that the obvious follow-up question, like what is your philosophy or strategy for getting the most out of people to get them to rise above what they think they can do?
Yeah, man, these are such good questions. The answers are going to seem a little jejune, my friend. They're going to be jejune because we needn't reinvent the wheel. How do we do it? We read and we write. So, maybe the very first class, if it's an intro class, which I haven't taught in a bit, but, we're going to read Natalie Diaz's Abecedarian for the, now the name escapes, the title escapes me, concerning the subjugation of a wild Indian reservation by, the one. And we read it, each kid, each student, octogenarian gets a line. We read it out loud. What do you notice? What do you wonder? We really start at this level. We're not trying to find the great mysteries within it. We're not trying to act like we're all scholars of the form. We're just simply saying, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you think? What do you feel? What does it make you, where does it make your mind go, etc. Anyway, and then we try to do the same thing. And the Abecedarian is a great form because it sort of naturally draws you forward. The first line starts with A. For those of you not in the know, you're all in the know. But the second line starts with B, third line with C. So it kind of harkens back to childlike language play. And so, that's how I think with reading work that is accessible, a little bit accessible and a little bit odd, right? Because we want it to do things language doesn't normally do. We're going to put a little more pressure on it sonically, visually, in terms of suggestibility, metaphor, whatever. And then just sort of layer your work over theirs. That's where we begin. How do we do it otherwise? I mean, it's not so different. We read, we talk about what we read, and we do writing under the spell of different writers, whether it's Weldon Keys or a million others.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that the poets that unlock students the most are also your favorite poets? Like you mentioned having that sort of strangeness mixed with clarity as being something that's really important. Is it happen to be that those are your favorite poets too? I was thinking maybe like James Tate as you're reading that, with how odd he can be with being straightforward about what's going on, I
love it that you mentioned James Tate, because my first collection, A Note at Heart Rock, I have a poem, Love Letter to James Tate. So you are so savvy, man. I don't know. We got to hang out more often. I don't know. We're going to have to move somewhere in the middle, California, Nebraska. Start a new life together, Timothy. I'm sorry. This is going in a weird direction. But yeah, clarity and oddness. That's the sweet spot for me. I mean, I do want, Ted Kooser was an influential teacher. Grace Bauer, there are many, and he's all about clarity. Like his metaphor is like, you want the poem to be like a glass bottom boat. So you can see the entire seabed. You can see the anemones and the coral and the fish of various hues. And that's how, that's his work, which was in my Rattle, which was in my issue, your issue, our issue of Rattle. There was Ted, my teacher. It was a miracle. And that beautiful poem of his, Bearing Paul, which is so clear, right? There it is. But I also really do kind of value oddness, surprise, whimsy. I don't know. I was going to say perversity, but I don't really value that. But the bizarre, the unsettling, the strange. So I'm not strange enough to be like Joshua Beckman, maybe, where it's always just sort of strange and I don't quite get it, or John Ashbery, maybe. Make Fewer Enemies, Todd. That should have been a note I put above my laptop. I love you, Joshua Beckman. Anyway, and I'm not like Ted, where I'm gonna mostly focus on what's in front of me and making it as clear and vivid and beautiful as possible, and then using metaphor to just make it tingle. It's going to be looser. It's going to just sort of be this kind of a cross-pollination or feedback loop between those two extremes, neither of which I'm that good at, but somehow in concert, they sort of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think it's really well described. Let's see. At this point in the show, I should say, if you're enjoying this conversation and Todd's poems, please do click the like button. We've always got like 3 times as many people watching as have clicked like so far, and the like button helps, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube. I don't know what actually you get to see if you're on X, but whatever that is, click something there too, probably. If you're listening after the fact, click that too. And also, if you have any questions for Todd, please leave them in the chat windows on Facebook or YouTube. Todd's here, loves questions, I'm sure. He's saying bring them on. And put them in bold if you can, the word question, so I can see it as I'm scrolling up through all the comments. But in the meantime, Todd, let's hear another poem.
Okay. Here we go. This is Placebo. Forever we dawdled in a basement like a bomb shelter and called it Shangri-La. My friend, the board-certified radiologist who says I am her antidote to existence and me. Another human hourglass known for wincing at dashcam footage of the invincible Sandra Bland, then cutting more pills for breakfast. Secretly, I was getting bored with the lascivious drip of icicles from eaves and found the world unreadable. I'm so depressed, she kept saying, and I nodded like a black and white television father. I'm only a placebo, I finally rebutted as she chased peas around a plate. When her neurologist texted, expect symptoms to persist for years, walls we had painted seafoam green seemed to suddenly loom. I look old and gaunt, she cried into her mirror. No, you don't, I lied.
Yeah, and that was Placebo by Todd Robinson. Todd, so what can you tell us about your writing process? You mentioned that maybe 5% of the poems see the light of day, so you share with other people. So that sort of implies that you're a maximalist, writing a lot and then crafting. But what is your process like when you sit down to write, and how often you do it? What's that look like?
Right now, I'm doing it every day because I'm doing the Stafford Challenge. I'm not typically a daily writer, but when I don't regularly write, it can feel like long passages of silence. And, I don't like those times. They kind of feel like they could easily become permanent. So I'm somebody who, yeah, needs to keep moving, keep writing. So the process right now is every day, and it's only been a month. Knock on wood, we're going strong. We're going
How
strong
long is the
since
Stafford Challenge? Is it
it's a full year. It's
a
from
full year of
Stafford's,
Oklahoma Day? Okay.
William Stafford's,
Mhm.
yeah, birthday, January to 17th or whatever.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, which I've never done. I've never done a poem a day for a year. I tried last year and I made it about 4 months before it ground to a halt. So I haven't broken my own record. But yeah, generally, my wife Cheryl's always saying, you're always saying you're never writing, but somehow you keep writing. And is that true for you? I mean, I don't know. I always feel like I could be and should be more productive.
Hmm.
But somehow I am sort of productive. I don't know.
Yeah, well, for me personally, I'm always trying to make the space for it and never actually doing it. So that's why the Rattlecast helps, because I write a poem for the second half of the show every week, and at least I have that, And usually I'm writing it like a half hour before the show, but it keeps some kind of deadline and gives me something. Because I wrote, like I said at the top of the show, I wrote a book in 2008, 2009, and then didn't write really anything for years. And I felt like that. Like once I stopped writing a little bit, it felt like that thing where it just it felt so far away that even if I sat down to try, I couldn't reach it. And then something really bad happened too, where I went to a workshop with Ellen Bass, and I had a week of just writing. And after the first day, it was easy again. And then instead of the lesson that you should write every day took hold, it was like, oh, well, you can get it back anytime you want. And I let another years go by without writing again. So I don't know. I mean, that's how it's been for me. So I always wanted to write more. I have a fantasy of writing every day, but there's so much stuff going on that it's just impossible.
Yeah, I mean, something's got to give, and you're prompting so many people to write, which is miraculous of you, which I think is such a great humanizing wave of effort that you're putting out into the world, and it's coming back. And my friends Nano and Natalie, Nano Taggart, Natalie Young, who run Sugar House Review, they're both poets, and I think they would say sort of similar things, that they wish they wrote more. And I'm teaching, and these things require energy. They require bandwidth, and you don't just sort of move from whatever obligations you have to immediately crafting a beautiful sonnet. It doesn't quite work like that. But yeah. And man, this last book came out in 2018. I've been kind of sort of steadily writing since then, but there are often very long dry periods. So this Stafford Challenge in roughly 40 days or whatever. I think I've got one poem I really like, and then a couple bearable ones, maybe two bearable ones.
Mm-hmm.
So there again is about that same ratio. As for the process, it almost always begins with reading. So I read the poem a day that you're sending, several other ones. I usually will sift through until I find one that speaks to me. Take a look at it and sort of think, how do they enter into the poem? Do they start with a question? Do they start with dialogue? Do they start with the scene? Do they start with the metaphor? What's the momentum? What's the mood? How might I sort of appropriate that or follow in those footsteps? So it just helps me kind of get started. That's the pretty typical process. So,
yeah.
and it doesn't matter, it seems like it's been at night lately more, which isn't necessarily a good time, but I know I've got that damn Stafford challenge deadline. So so it happens to be more at night. That's not the best time though. I think the best time is probably for me afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
I need it to be light out, still not tired, not thinking about dinner. just, I don't know. Good afternoon chunk of time.
Uh-huh. Well, let's hear another poem. The next one's pretty short. The night we shared a bed.
Yeah, the last night we shared a bed. You snored. I seethed. The furnace huffed or stayed still. A long bubble of paint in the corner where water wormed in. The creak and give of hours. The grace note of your foot touching mine in the bottomless dark.
And that was the last night we shared a bed. Let's see. So Shantae Orion had a question.
Oh, sweet Shantae.
That's
Shantae
relevant to what
published
you were just saying. Is your writing different now that you're not so much of an insomniac? So I didn't realize you were an insomniac. Does that change anything? And what was the cure, I guess, for insomnia?
The only real cure, my friends, is death. You know that. But I've been taking melatonin 1 milligram, which is almost too much. I've been sober for 10 years, Timothy. So a little bit of any kind of compound sends me kind of flailing, like a Batman, like that original Batman, that Dutch angle. I just get a little wild. So, but I think that's helped a lot. Magnesium and melatonin seem to be doing the trick. So, as for Shantae, wonderful Shantae, publisher of Rinky Dink Press, check him out, everybody. I don't think there's a change that I notice. I'm always answering from this agnostic point of view where I'm like, I don't know, maybe, could be, it's mysterious. We'll never really know. So that's sort of my nature. But to attempt to answer, insomnia has its merits for writing. That love letter to James Tate, maybe another few from the book, that book came out of 3 a.m. writing sessions when your tether to the daily life of obligations and jobs and planning and so forth isn't there so much, or it's there but in a more kind of charged, wild way. You're closer to dreaming. So I think insomnia has benefits maybe for writing if you go to the page and stay there long enough to benefit. The downside of insomnia is you just feel like crap a lot. So you sort of stumble through the day and you might not be good for much. But on the other hand, I will do a lot of things to write a good poem. I would pay a great deal. I'd pay in years, I'd pay in gold, whatever you got. Yeah, there's nothing better. We know it, right?
Well, let's see. Myro Dowdle wants to know, Todd, how do you access the dream space that seems to characterize your poetry? That oddness, as you say, that balances the clarity.
Wow, what a great question. What a well-turned question. I want to compliment the question. Well said. How do you access it? By reading, again, just such jejune answers. By reading, in part, because you see the capacity for leaping. I really love this poet. I turned on to him. I was reading Sugar House Review maybe a year ago, and this poet, Philip Schaefer, who's out of Montana. He's got one book, a couple chapbooks, but a book, Bad Summon, which I love. And his poetry is like this, that dream space where you're sort of in a town in Montana, but you're also in a place where, like David Lynch, where, a character is going to walk in from somewhere who seems like they're from, Saturn or whatever, or people are going to behave in ways that don't seem necessarily real, that are kind of hallucinatory. Anyway, Philip Schaefer, props to him. Fernando Pessoa. We go back to T.S. Eliot and the Love Song of Joffrey Prufrock. I mean, that's sort of in dream space too. You've got the yellow fog of London curling around a house like a cat. I mean, that sounds like dream language, dream logic too. And even, I was just talking about Ted Kooser and Rattle in that poem where he's carrying his friend's coffin, and he talks about lowering the coffin on the sort of spongy surface netting or whatever above the grave. And some, I can't remember, maybe you probably remember better, Timothy, but something, shadow or grief or something is welling out around the feet of the men of the grievers and the family carrying the coffin and so on. And I mean, I think poetry is always kind of in dream space. Not all of it, not all the time, but a good bunch of it. The stuff I like, I like to sort of drift a bit. How do you access it? Read.
Yeah, great advice. Let's see, we have 2 poems left. Let's do one poem, and then we'll do a quick questions, and then the last one.
Okay, thanks. This is An Agnostic Maps God's Country. Stirring bourbon and corn syrup in the cracked ancestral cup, you ponder a night's drive west, where cattle cough at the edge of purgatory as the last antenna whips past rotten homesteads. Crackling cowboy songs melting farm girls toward all sorts of trouble. The Lord, they call him who stacks nimbus clouds over coyote dens and hay mows, jealous even as he teases green shoots from rows. Sunlight through windmill blades are facets of his face, but death still stands every cowlick down at last. He leadeth me to still waters, another nocturne to bounce off the cloud rack. Chemistry has truer aim, but plonks perhaps against the backbone of a lower power. Remember that as you climb the celestial ladder Godward, while stars fall farther away and daily coffee cools iron dark as constellations wink out, and the voice that welcomed you here stammers goodbye.
Yeah, and that was Todd Robinson with An Agnostic Maps God's Country. Okay, Todd, so let's do some lightning round of questions from Eric Campbell, because he left a few. I'm trying to find the original one. I might have to paraphrase. Oh, here it is. He says, what is Todd's favorite Rush album and why? And why is it 2000 or 2112?
No, man, it's not 2112, dude. Although I can hear those drums, baby. No, man, my favorite, I think it's Farewell to Kings. Let's not talk about why. This is the lightning round.
All right. And Eric's other question was, what 3 poetry books would you want on a desert island? No collected or selected works allowed. Only 3.
Oh, that man, that caveat's brutal, right? That's how he's rough, man. Like Eric, more than most people, is a devotee of authenticity. This is how he traps you. The posers and fakes, they don't get through. Eric, I think I would take Corpse Pose by Eric Campbell, or possibly Arguments for Stillness by Eric Campbell. This sounds facetious, but those are great books. Oh, Eric, I'm gonna take Diane Seuss's Four-Legged Girl. I think you get your money's worth with that book. They're long poems. They're super dense and naughty, Knotty, also Naughty sometimes. Anyway, we're going to take that because, man, you read her poems and you're like, how can someone do this, accomplish this in a poem? How can this be at once like as accessible as like macaroni and cheese? That sounds like an insult, but it's not. And as esoteric as like Kabbalistic, commentary. How can it be both? How can it do that? How can she do that? She does it time and time again. So that's only one answer. It's going to take time. This is a lightning round, Eric. There's no time for the other 2.
All right. Well, one more question too, Todd. This is from The Poetry and Music of Carlos Ornelas. And they say, Todd, how often do you read your poetry to the general public, and where can we see more of it? Which made me want to know, too, about the poetry reading series you did, which I wanted to ask about. It says it's on a long hiatus since COVID. Tell us a little bit about just doing a reading series. Poetry is so fun when the poets are good and know how to perform and share their poems in an entertaining way. And so what was your experience like with reading series? Why isn't it continuing? Do you have plans to continue it in the future? And what makes a good reading? I guess it's a big question, but I'm curious about all that.
Yeah, there's a lot of component parts. First of all, I want to say I'm terrible. I haven't updated my website. So you got like a pretty old bio there. That's on me and Nano Taggart, who helped me design it. I forgot how to update it. I tried. It wasn't working. So, but that reading series, that was so delightful. The premise was, I think, pretty singular. The idea was that I would invite 3 3 writers, and each of them would invite another writer. So we got a kind of a broader sort of spread, not just people I knew. 6 writers was quite a bit. Maybe that was too much for some people, but man, it was Friday night in this huge space, and we were in downtown where parking was terrible, and we were getting 80, 90, 100 people showing up for that. So I think that was a really good move, and the pandemic did sort of wreck it. But if I were going to do it again, I might say maybe I'll invite 2 writers, and they can each invite 2. I like that model. I like how it casts a broader net. I do run my department, the University of Nebraska at Omaha Writers Workshop. I run our spring reading series. Should I not say that? Is everyone going to say, please invite me now? I can only invite 1 poet a semester, maybe 2, and we're kind of booked for a while. But anyway, so I run that, and I organize it, contracts, MC, and all that stuff. What makes a good series or a good reading? Well, you need a good crowd. I think sometimes you're playing for the bartender, but I think a good crowd is really important. You get a good sort of crackle back and forth. So a crowd who listens, a crowd who laughs, maybe as one once in a while is amazing. A crowd who is hushed when there's a cause to be hushed. I think that's really important. But of course, you need a writer who's probably A, has good stuff on the page. B, is reads it clearly. I don't know. These are dumb answers. Forgive me. Can you cut this from the podcast? Make me beautiful, Timothy.
Will do. Well, AI can do anything, Todd.
AI.
Well, no, that's great. It's baffling to me because the people who went to our reading series, we had it physically in a bookstore once a month. Was it once a month? Yeah, I think it was once a month. And everybody just loved it. The same people came back every time. It was like a highlight of everything. And I never understand why it's not more of a popular thing. It's always a mystery to me. And
and I will say, I do a lot of readings. To the question specifically, I'm in Omaha, Nebraska. I probably read, I don't know, once every 3 to 5 months. It kind of varies at bars, bookstores, backyards, whatever. And it seems to me the readings I go to are well attended. And they're in a variety of spaces with varieties of types of work. I think we're a pretty good literary town here. But it's still kind of niche, it takes a kind of attention and concentration to listen to poetry, especially perhaps poetry of the bent that you and I like, Timothy, right? Yeah.
All right. Well,
it's a labor. It's a labor to listen to.
Yeah, it is a bit. And I don't know. I think so many people will be enriched by it, though. It's just a shame. It really is. But anyway, let's close out with one last poem, Todd.
Yeah, and I just want to say, buddy, it's a shame. You've got thousands of people who are hearkening to your call, and you're like, more. Give me more, I tell you. I'm going to close with a poem from Mass for Shut-ins, art by my dear friend, Bill Hoover. This is called Renewing the Vows. My marriage is getting big and sex-addled. She swishes past me naked from the belly down, or closes herself into herself, television the only noise. We drink margaritas too often, eat dinner in separate rooms, make amniotic love in the pool, read Lorca aloud in bed at night, sulk and stare into dreams we can never remember. She yells at me to turn down astral weeks. I beg her to call her sister. She drops shoes everywhere, and I pick them up. We put on pounds. We laugh at a comedian's bleak truths. We are inviolate, spinning through St. Cecilia at noon, just us and 2 wiry widows in that cold heaven. She slams the bedroom door. I stalk outside. She kisses my cheek. We drink beer at a bar, conspiring to drive our crone of a neighbor insane. She berates me for neglecting her plants. I belittle her in front of a dozen friends. She tells me this is what I always do. I tell her she infantilizes me, buys me underwear that is entirely too cute. We watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy every Sunday. She orders endless textiles from catalogs. We sway to reggae all through June. She hides from her family, from mine, from everyone. I insult her for refusing to vote. She insults me for believing it matters. We watch seahorses and dragons coalesce in clouds. She used to believe in cloud gazing. Our feet creak every morning. Our throats congeal every night. Gray hairs begin to frame that doll baby face. My back no longer lets me take it for granted. Our mortgage is nearly paid. The lawn grows thick and embarrassed. No one visits. We discuss the merits of quinoa, the verities of booze, the infamy of Republicans. We drive to Hannibal, photograph that tired river town, smell the musk of clemens on every stone. She reads. I fret about my teaching, and she says I can't help you. She tends patients all day while I walk the dog, graze Facebook, eat organics. We shout, we chortle, we laze, we grunt. I ignore her calls from work. We drive to Zesto twice in one day, sugar sticky on our lips. She refuses to eat Vietnamese. I refuse to stop smoking. The house leaks. The hospital overbills us. We assume old friends will never die. We used to cry together, but it's been moons. Our bikes rust in the garage. We put on the Dead and boogie past midnight. She gets buzzed and remembers her parents, gone now 7 years. We repeat our marriage vows, stare at the pictures of young strangers in the big album. She rubs calamine lotion on my skin. I massage her shoulders. She sings a song about her boobs. I make the bed. She offers me mushrooms. I offer her bread. We fly to Kauai and Craig T. Nelson sits 2 tables away and we say nothing. We kayak down a river, unable to build a rhythm. She endures my snoring. I endure her negativity. We vow to stop drinking for a week. We drink. I caress her face. She kisses me again and again and again. We pick cherry tomatoes. She sews my shirt. I make her an appointment. She tells me my mom is acting funny. She wants to know where I put her iPad. I praise her toes. She tells me to shave. I put her green hat on a statue of Poseidon. She asks me why I never write poems about her. I tell her every poem is about her.
Yeah, and that was Renewing the Vows by Todd Robinson. A beautiful poem to end on. That was, again, from Mass for Shut-ins, a really great poem, a great book of poems by Todd. You check out his website to find that book. And Todd, thanks again for being a guest. Really so much fun talking to you. Such wonderful poems. Really great to get to know you better. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Timothy. You're a dreamboat, and I mean that in every sense.
Thanks so much, Todd.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Yeah, that was Todd
too.
Robinson once again. And you can find all of Todd's work at his website, which, as we mentioned at the top of the show, is toddfather.net. So find Todd there at toddfather.net. Find Mass for Shut-ins, his other book, which was Note at Heart Rock, and figure out what Todd's up to as well by following that website. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was to write a poem that includes a memory you've never shared and include dialogue. That is your prompt for this week. Write a poem that includes a memory you've never shared and dialogue. Remember, the max time on camera should be about 3 minutes. So if it's a shorter poem, it's a 1-page max either way. But if you're sort of filling up the page, let's just jump right to it. If you got a short poem, we can banter a little bit. But we try to get 3 minutes so we can get to everybody in a timely fashion. Email your poem if you've got a poem like this to share to promptlines@rattle.com. That's promptlines@rattle.com, all one word. And then find the Zoom link, which I'm about to deploy on Facebook and YouTube. And join us on the Zoom, but only if you've got a poem to share. If you want to sit back and just enjoy the poems, the best place to do it is right where you are, because then you can read along with the poets as they share their work. But if you want to share one, jump on the Zoom, and we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back with our prompt poems editor, associate editor Katie Dozier. How you doing tonight, Katie?
I wear many hats, and it's always a wonder which one you're going to mention.
I know. Well, there's so many. They're all so relevant, as always. But so our prompt this week was to write... I got to scroll back down to it. I forgot already.
Well, I forgot too.
It was
so
write an
it's more
elegy. No,
for me.
I messed that up.
No, it's not elegy. I can do it. Okay.
Write a poem that
No. Okay, wait. Okay. Write a poem that talks about a memory that you've never discussed before and includes dialogue. And I believe I phrased it better when it was written down. But that is roughly the prompt.
Okay, so what did you come up with? And how did you find a memory? I found it really hard to find a memory that I hadn't shared with anybody, because all the memories that you have are actually fake memories from retelling the memories. And so it's if you haven't told it before, where is it?
Well, that was exactly how I wound up with the poker-related poem, because I was like, well, how am I supposed to do this? I've told you everything. Seriously, I was literally trying to come up with things, and I was, nope, told them about that. So I just remembered one specific hand that's boring, which is why I've never told you about it, but hopefully comes alive a little bit more in the poem. So I should also say, in terms of poker terminology, this requires a little bit. A 7-deuce offsuit, not a good hand.
That's
not
a good hand. The worst hand, or is it 2-9?
Well, it depends on the format you're playing, but in general, if you're playing, in general, it's what I mean without getting too technical. And then the deck being stacked usually refers to someone coming up with a way to rig a game or something. And usually it has a negative connotation, but it's not the way I went with this.
All right. Okay. Well, let's hear it.
All right. And it's a Haibin.
Okay.
The turn. Here we are now, tucked into a life that once seemed impossible. You at your office right outside mine, and I still glance sideways to admire things that are supposed to be inconsequential, but are of every consequence. How I consider the edge of your beard, or the way your socks are sometimes half on and half off. Would you like is a phrase I somehow hear now every day. Was it only yesterday that I shoved in all my chips over the green felt when all I had was 7-deuce offsuit? Holding hands, the deck was always stacked.
Oh, that's such a sweet poem.
So I agree with the Toddfather that you're a dreamboat.
Aw. Well, that is so sweet. Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, great use of your poker references too.
Yeah, the socks are fully on though right now.
They are. Yeah,
so sorry to disappoint. You do that sometimes though.
I do.
It's true.
Because my
cute.
feet get a little hot.
I know, it's so cute.
I don't want to take my socks off in case they get cold later.
And then
so I just
and I'm always barefoot because I grew up mainly in Florida.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Anyway, that was the turn. Thanks for sharing that,
Yeah.
Katie.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then mine was this. And it was hard for me, but I found a memory from my childhood that I don't think I shared with you.
After we were looking through some childhood pictures,
Exactly.
your mom very sweetly
I think
gave you.
that's what made me think about it. It was think about being that age, because my mom sent me some poems. Hey, Mom, she sent me some not poems, photos
some
from
photos,
childhood.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, that were really fun to see.
Yeah, so we were flipping through them the other night, and anyway, it just sort of thought me about being that age again, and this memory kind of came up when I dug. Okay. Dialogue, it's called. So there I got the includes dialogue. See?
Oh my gosh, I'm glad that's cute.
Yeah. Dialogue. Want to drive, he said, pulling over on the shoulder. And then he hauled me up before I could answer. The 6-year sack of my body lifted over the armrest and onto his lap. He pulled back out to the black top and let go of the wheel. The Oldsmobile drifted between lanes, and he let it drift, waiting for my terror to turn. I felt like a time lapse of myself, a green fruit ripening then rotting, some new shoot springing from the damp earth. That dark pod opened, and we drove that way through the southern tier of my childhood, straight through to Pittsburgh. Every curve was learning to steer, and when the big trucks passed, we asked them to blow their horns, and they would, 2 blasts into the brightness of the day. That is dialogue.
I used to do that every time I passed a truck too, and then going to soccer games. Like, yeah, it was like I want to do it again, honestly, but I shouldn't.
Anyway, all right, so that was my poem this week. Let's see what everybody else has, and let's go first to Christiana Doucette.
Hi.
Oh, sorry to hear that,
thanks
Christiana.
for being here anyway.
Thanks for coming. Yeah. So what do you have to share with us today?
creative artistic interpretation because I'm fairly sure that I've talked about this memory with my mom who's involved in this memory, but I hadn't ever written a poem about it. And I figured, I don't think I've talked broadly about it either. So I went with this. Um, Growing up, my mom lost her hearing in college. So um, when I was maybe 6 or 7, I think, we got a hearing ear dog. You know how people who are blind have like a seeing eye dog? We had a hearing ear dog. So like Love would, our dog would let us know if the fire alarm went off. One time we were outside barbecuing and the smoke drifted in.
Oh,
And
wow.
we were supposed to go through a door, so she made the whole family go back inside. Um, and she was just the sweetest black lab. And so this is one of the memories with Love from that time. And the name of this poem is Love Should Be Gentle. I also want to say this is an early draft, and I think it needs some more revision, but I got something down at least.
That's
Okay.
great.
Yeah, yeah.
So, love should be gentle. The old lab bared her teeth and growled at me. No love, I scowled. Bad dog. I shook my head. But still, her hackles rose, and still she blocked the pathway to the fence, until I fled back to my mother's skirts as she hung clothes with wooden pins along the laundry line. A pinch of fear sat in my chest, that love might bite my hand, not friend, only canine. I played with twigs the storm had knocked to earth, as she laid beside the fence and whined. Her black fur caught the sun and gleamed a threat I never feared before. Love should be kind. Love should be gentle, softly full of kiss, not baring teeth and growling violence. Excuse me, ma'am. A man in uniform craned his neck across the gate. Love quieted. Mom dropped the basket and the laundry fell, crumpled on the mud as he inquired, Ma'am, the storm took down some trees, he explained. Then, stop! The fence is charged. There's a live wire. Love, like she understood just what he said, curled up beside me then, offering her head.
Oh, what a sweet memory. I love that last
Yeah.
couplet especially.
Yeah,
Love
it's
should
really
be
nice.
gentle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that
Hope you
memory.
feel better
Christiana.
soon, too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me too. Hopefully next week my
Yeah.
voice will be stronger.
Yeah, we hope so. Thanks, Christiana. Yeah, Christiana Doucette with Love Should Be Gentle. Let's go to Dick Westheimer next.
Oh, you mean prompt poet of the month, Dick Westheimer?
Prompt Poet of the Month, Dick Westheimer. None other, who else would it be? Hey, Dick.
Katie, obviously I'm grateful that you chose the poem, but this has happened a couple times with rattle poems that I've had less confidence in the poem than one of you has. And then reading it through, first through your eyes and then the eyes of folks who've read it in the public is a real gift. And
Aw.
I appreciate that a lot. And I also appreciate you doing these prompts, man, that just sort of like stir and itch and like flaky skin and like get it right. Oh man.
Oh, great. I have to say also your poem from Friday influenced me in that I've vowed to do better at following laundry care tags. It's like I see the tag and now I think of you and I think of poetry and like I care more.
Oh, the
suddenly.
little tag
Yeah.
behind Dick's
Good
knee.
news for our clothes.
Well, anyway, I do appreciate that reading that you all give things that perhaps find something that is, when I first wrote the poem I didn't see. So it worked again. You remember the last poem that you included? I said the same thing, which is, really? You want this poem? You want to choose somebody else? Quick note on this poem is that the almost all of this is so true, including the physics teacher who was a truth teller. And he inspired me about physics, but more importantly, he would tell me when I sucked. He would tell me when he thought I was full of crap, such as when I was like raising my fist. He said, well, go, see what it's like to be a wild activist. So anyway, how I lost the Vietnam War. And incidentally, Tim, does putting the word dialogue in your poem count as putting dialogue in your poem?
It does, apparently.
Does it? I don't know.
I'm asking for a friend.
It's creative, at least. I'll say that much.
How I lost the Vietnam War. There's no fun in remembering that late winter day in '68. The beech trees were still on the trees, but how would I know? I was a physics geek in a field with SDS guys not much older than me. We wanted to stop the war. The tallest one said, when the pigs, that's what we called the cops, try to clear us from the streets, go for their knees. The short guy, there were no girls, pulled me forward. Do it, he said. Kick me in the fucking knee. He called me pussy and turned to someone new. The next day at school, I went to Mr. L's lab. He was tuning an oscilloscope, a 2-input job with a glowing green screen. As I helped him ground the Y-axis probe, he asked super casually, how was the meeting? He'd suggested I go. They were the pigs, I said. I know, he replied. And you're not that kind, I thought, or brave enough to do what needs to be done. It was late winter day in 1968. The beech trees were still on the beech leaves were still on the trees, and the war burned like a napalm bomb for 5 more years. 5 times I've gone to visit that black granite wall near the mall in D.C. and count the names of the dead. It's all I can do.
Yeah, beautiful poem, Dick. Yeah, great memory there. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And great interview. I'm sure many other folks will say, but I'm a fan. I'm a fan of how Todd thinks about poetry.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
am
Me too.
Especially that last poem I really loved.
Yeah, that poem was great.
Yeah.
It was. And as all his poems were. Really, really touching, heartfelt. And then,
Yeah.
with such a warm, interesting personality too on
he
top of
was.
it all. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that poem, Dick. That was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you all. Bye.
Right. It was Dick Westheimer with How I Stopped the Vietnam War. And next, let's go to Lola Willis.
Hello.
Hi, Lola.
Hey, Lola, how you doing tonight?
Hi. Thanks for having me back.
All right. So, what do you have to share with us this week?
My poem is called Roll of the Eyes, and this is for my late daughter, Rain. You left your guessing to yes-no stones, black eye and one white shining, you took along in your pocket, pressed in your dampened palm for every fork. Should I take this pill, this train? Tell the man with the pulled pork po' boy dripping, I saw him in a dream screaming. Before crossing canal in the warped quarter sweating, people in the streets. Before picking your Powerball numbers at Brothers at 9:58 to win $7 like you did Easter week. I've let the universe steer the wheel to hilarious ends, and I'm happy when I'm laughing, you said. What said the eyes before raising the blade to your throat that bleak Tuesday afternoon you bled on the edge of the bed, rain slanting in from the window, pain thrown open? All I could answer, my love, I'm happy when you are. Please be safe. We all worship God winking.
Yeah, another powerful poem about your daughter. Thanks so much for sharing that, Lola. Another
Thank
great
you for
poem.
having
Yeah.
me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, take care. It was Lola Willis with Roll of the Eyes. Next, we'll go to Jared Campbell.
Hello.
Hi,
Hey,
Jared.
Jared, great to see you.
Good to see you.
So what do you got for us this week?
I wrote about the remains of Amun Nastawi Nacht.
Of what?
The remains of Amun Nastawi Nacht. There was a mummy in the art museum I would visit as a small child. When I close my eyes, I can see a cartonnage. It's painted with parades of gods and goddesses with varied heads, falcons and jackals, ibises and men. That mental image probably belongs to someone else's cartonnage. I've seen a lot of mummies in the years since then, both in person and on the internet. But here's a real memory from my childhood. I got my mom to take me to the gift store, and she bought me a mummy made of chocolate. I didn't want the chocolate. I wanted it because it came in a gold plastic package shaped like Tutankhamun's inner coffin. At home, I built Lego pyramids for my mummy. How childish to prefer the wrapper to the thing. Maybe we learn to love the surfaces of things when learning that's what keeps. The sweetness lasts a moment, so what's wrong with hanging on to what we're meant to throw away? I asked my mom, why were the Egyptians so obsessed with death? Because they loved life, so they wanted more, I imagine her saying, though this dialogue is surely a false memory, something I constructed to contain bits of knowledge gathered here and there. That's the thing with memories. Once they die, you dry them out, wrap them in cloth, build them a place to stay, and you can paint whatever you want on them.
That's great. Yeah. Did you, let me ask you, Jared, did you know that turn and that metaphor was coming when you wrote it? Was that an idea you had that you wrote toward, or did that pop out? That's an interesting metaphor.
Well, which metaphor?
Oh, the sign of a good poem indeed.
Well, the idea of, the mummy is really only the outside of the person, right? And it's like that's what remains, and all of that, like all of that metaphor in like the first half of the final stanza, that was all there, right? The final, that your memories are things that you paint whatever you want on them because they're all false memories that come from the retellings. That actually was something that happened only during the course of the writing.
That's exactly
great. Yeah.
It's something, because it shows just in that poem how using a metaphor becomes a scaffold to understanding something a little better.
And also, you didn't take the first exit of the poem, and I'm glad you pushed through. Also, I have to say that it was great that you answered who that person was by just reading the poem. It's in the poem. We don't need the preamble.
The answer would be redundant. If you scroll down far enough, you actually get to a picture of that cartoon.
Oh, wow.
I
see that. Oh, look at that.
In there somewhere. It got like the sending reformatted it a little bit, so you have to look for it, but it's in there.
Yeah, we got it up. Yep.
Yeah, well, very cool. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Great poem and cool topic too.
It's a beautiful mummy. All right, bye.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, Jared. Yeah, Jared Kama with the remains of Amen Nastawe Nakta.
Well done.
All right. Let's go to Maro Dowdle next.
Hi, guys. How are you?
Hi,
Great
to see you.
Yeah.
Hi, good to see you too. So, Katie, I saw this prompt and I was like, well, surely Katie is providing an invitation for us to reveal some of our most deeply held shame.
Yes.
So, that's like my Irish Catholic background. That's just going to respond in that way. So I did. And I'm just going to say, caveat, I would never do this now. I'm a completely different person now. This would never happen. And the shelter options that there were pretty much a guarantee to the end. So that's all I'll say. And then I'll just read this.
Great.
I'm just preemptively asking for forgiveness is what that's really
You have
about.
it. I love super honest poems. I mean, there's this tendency for people to present themselves like it's a memoir. Like, look at this amazing thing I did in this poem.
Right.
We are not perfect people. You're awesome, Mauro. I love you. But, we're not perfect people. So that's great.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. All right. What kind of dog? He came with a name, Brenner. And so we kept it. The lady had brought him to the dog park. He played well with my terrier. The lady asked if I would take him, a free pet. I didn't ask why he was no longer wanted. Boy, I must have been high to say yes. I'd known him for 10 minutes. She hauled all his things from her hatchback. Crate, leash, plastic bowl, not one toy. My partner wasn't happy with what I carried in with the groceries, but Brenner stayed. He was a lovely creature, mutt or mix, you might say, depending on your temperament or your threshold for mercy. He stood knee-high in his brindle coat. Those big hazel eyes showed he'd had it rough. Had it tough. He was starved. I was needed. Wasn't that enough? I thought he'd be a good friend to my terrier, but he saw her as a rival. If I left them alone together, he'd chew on her, making tiny wounds I didn't find until she began to smell like stewed zucchini. She was my baby. She'd been there first. Brenner had to go after just 3 months. We didn't know anyone who might want him. An ad in the paper turned up nothing. One morning, my partner took Brenner for a ride, returned alone. Where did you take him? I asked, imagining a shelter. I couldn't put him in that prison, my partner replied. I let him out into the woods, on the side of the highway. He looked back one time. The eyes shine. Brindle slips between the trees. This picture, it's what survives of that dog, my dog, who had no idea how to live in the wild. And what kind of dog was I to take him in, not thinking how hard it might be to keep him? What kind of dog was I to let him go?
Mm. Yeah, that's great honesty at the end, especially.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Mara.
It.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks. There was Maro Dowdle with What Kind of Dog? Let's go to Nivedita next.
Hello.
Hey, Nivi, great to see you.
Hey, how you guys doing?
They're great. Yeah. So what do you got for us?
It's quite a simple memory actually from childhood, also persists to this day. But things that we start but leave unfinished, and then you have your parents come in and tell you, why didn't you finish it? You started it. You.
Well, we're dealing with a lot of the other side of that.
Yeah, we are.
These days with the 4 kids. Yeah.
Right. I think poor parents more like it. For having to put up with us as kids. I never told you. You can't just leave it like that, she said, her voice catching in the hush of the room. The lamp flickered. Not from wind, not from ghosts, just bad wiring. But still. It's not mine to fix, I replied, watching the light stutter over her face, shadow and glow, shadow and glow. Outside, a street dog yawned, curled into a heap of bones and dust. Inside, she sighed. You always do this, she said, pulling her knees to her chest. I didn't answer. The walls knew. The silence knew. Somewhere between the hum of the fridge and the creak of the old fan, I almost told her. But almost never counted.
Great look inside the mind of childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing that, Nivi.
Thanks, Nivi.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks, Katie. Have a good evening.
Yep, have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, it was Nivi DeKarthik with I Never Told You. Let's go to Brian O'Sullivan next.
Hello, how you doing?
Hey, good.
Hey, Brian, great to see you.
Good to see you. So I had some of the same challenges with the prompt, and I think they'll come out in the poem itself. It's called The Secret Flow. Let me tell you of a secret memory that I've never shared with anyone, because I only now have made it up. Once I, the world's worst skier, was left behind on a black diamond run in Park City. I lunged and plowed, I fell and fell again. But as the sun blazed upon the snow, a rhythm clicked and a power flowed through me. I had an intimation of what it must be like to be a skier, as I weaved back and forth around the moguls, and the crust of snow began to melt from my clothes. Back at the lodge, Sharon hugged me and said, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you're okay. We thought it was just a blue run, and when we saw it wasn't, we'd skied too far and we couldn't find you." My other friends apologized profusely. I smiled. "No problem," I told them, speaking loosely. I didn't tell them the story of my fleeting glory. But now, as I'm telling you about it, I'm wondering, maybe it really did happen after all.
Well, I really enjoyed the ending, especially and the asides.
Funny too.
Yeah, the secret flow.
True. I really don't know if it happened or not. I mean, I really did get lost like that, but I may have sort of made up in my mind the idea that I skied well for the one time in my life when that happened.
Well, I believe it happened.
Well, yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Brian. That was fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, Brian O'Sullivan with the secret flow. Let's go to Mike Bales next.
Boy, it's brave to write. Takes a lot of courage to write a poem like this, writing about things we don't want to talk about. This doesn't have dialogue because I didn't talk about it before. But we're going back to Minnesota like we did last week. I sent it to you, and it's insubmittable.
Yeah,
Poem's called Polite Conversation.
Okay.
My past shadows me today. Childhood spent in Minnesota, while the roommates downstairs make each other lunch. No need for them to know everything, I figure. They already know I've lived 1,000 lives. I've just enough time for a little small talk. I'm home from work for the day, sitting upstairs alone, watching snow fall, longing for warmer days, longing for my youth. I tell them about Minnesota, about farms and the lake where I spent my summers, but details are left out. One day I walked along the highway, found large rocks, and dropped them off a bridge. Oh, the excitement felt. Then shock after I almost sank the neighbor's boat. I kept this incident to myself as the neighbor and I stood across the fence from each other and talked when I could have walked off to play. To this day, I've never known if he ever knew this man who put his faith in me.
Yeah, great memory. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And there was Mike Bales with a polite conversation. Yeah, I love going back in people's memories and all the complications that memory brings up. Really fascinating too. Yeah, that was wonderful. Thanks, Mike. Next,
now I feel a little bit like I should have picked a more true memory than one hand of poker. Cheated my own prompt.
Well,
everybody's going so deep. I'm like, I played this bluff, guys.
Well, there are a lot of memories, that you don't share because you played how many hands of
poker?
Poker?
Because they were boring. Yeah, 15 million.
But if
hands.
you remember them,
I don't remember most, thankfully.
Okay. Well, there you go. All right. Well, let's go to Bethany Jarmel next. And Bethany, of course, is going to be the guest next week.
Yay.
So great to see you here, Bethany. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Yeah, I was taking notes on all the questions that you ask. Paying extra attention to that over the last few weeks.
Well, the problem is I try to mix them up. So.
Bethany.
Oh, you do. It's true.
Your episode's going to be great. I'm really excited.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited for that as well. This prompt was interesting and fun. I thought the memory that came back was more on the traumatic side than the sweet side. Some of them have been more sweet. They're shared tonight. So I guess that's my content warning on it.
Okay.
But yeah. So it is, I've never told anyone. Oh, I wanted to say, the thing I struggled with this prompt is actually including the dialogue. Not because I have a hard time writing dialogue, but because it makes it feel like prose to me. Maybe because I also write creative nonfiction and some other genres, but I was like, how do I make this more poem-like? So anyway, I'd love to hear thoughts on that at some point, and maybe that on a critique of the week or something. But
that's a good point. Maybe I should talk about that.
Talk about dialogue in there. Yeah, that was actually how we ended up having it in this prompt too. Was I was saying, I'd like to screenwrite, but I don't know anything about dialogue, and I wanted to look at dialogue. So
yeah, and then too, we were talking to Lou Watts in that the interview coming up, and he talked about how screenwriting led him to include a lot of dialogue in his Haibin, which is he thinks the key to making his Haibin really good. So
yeah. So anyway, here's the attempt. All right. So it's I've never told anyone this memory from 1997. I'm 5, plaid jumper and 2 braids down my back, tapping my thick pencil on my desk. Mrs. Wolf's at the board, filling the air with chalk residue. Footsteps approach. Freddie, the new kid with freckles, punches my arm. I yelp in surprise. Mrs. Wolf whips around and snarls, "Freddie, get back in your seat." He spits back, "You can't tell me what to do. You're not my mom," and punches Mrs. Wolf in the stomach. She grabs him by the ear and yanks him toward her desk while he whimpers, "Stop, that hurts. That hurts." His ear turns the color of Red Riding Hood's cloak. The rest of us freeze, eyes wide, mouths gaping. Mrs. Wolf scours her desk, pulls out a medicine bottle and measuring spoon, pours the reddish liquid as Freddie cries, "Wait, no, I already took my medicine. Please stop." Mrs. Wolf says, "Clearly, you need more," shoving the spoon in his mouth. He swallows and gasps. I take a deep breath, willing my heart to not split open like firewood. After that day, we never see Freddie again. Every morning, Mrs. Wolf smiles wide. I count each tooth.
Oh,
that's terrifying.
That really is.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Creepy memory.
That's awful. Oh my gosh. Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Bethany.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to next week. It's Lightning as a Mother is Bethany's new book, which is just come out like this week or last week or really recently. So we're looking forward to talking about that.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Bethany. Yeah, but that was Bethany Jormal with this week's poem, "I've Never Told Anyone This Memory" from 1997.
And we can confidently say we'll see you next week.
Yeah, we definitely can. Well, hopefully.
Hopefully. She will be there.
Yeah, she could be the second no-show, and then that would be trouble.
Ever in the history of the Rattlecast. Yep.
All right. Well, thanks, Bethany. Okay, and then next in line is Amanda Harris.
Hey, guys. So this prompt for me was definitely a soul-searching prompt. And what I came up with, it was randomly accessed memory. I am 7 and watching the beast in my throat grow into an alien that defaces the ground that becomes you. The ground has no teeth. The ground knows no higher law. On a good day, that excuses its violence. This is not that good day, I explain God saying. This is the day of swollen faces and unexplained charts discussing my SED rate. The day of lost teeth, the day of holes drilled into stomachs, the day silence like poverty surrendered itself and swallowed.
Wow, yeah, great energy in that as always, Amanda. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that was Amanda Harris with Randomly Accessed Memory. Great title, too. I really like going that direction.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a Daft Punk reference.
Oh, okay,
Interesting.
great.
All
Thanks.
right. Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Yeah, it was Amanda Harris. Next, let's go to Nancy Tennell.
I struggled with this prompt too but this is actually a 100% true memory. And the dialogue is verbatim. I'm surprised I can remember it after all these years, but I'd never bothered to talk about it with anyone. And I don't know if Sense Memory is the best title, an accurate title, but that's what it's called, Sense Memory.
All right.
And I'm trying a new little thing tonight. I'm putting it up on my screen. The bell had not rung, but it would in a minute, to halt the thrum of third-grade voices, the buzz of boys sharing baseball cards, while girls compared their pop bead bracelets, connected in so many pastel variations. I walked to the front with my brand new pencil, Ticonderoga, number 2 lead, not yet paired to a point on the end. "Can I sharpen my pencil, Miss Newworth?" I said. With her lips tightly closed, she made a small sound, which I thought was a yes. So I began the task, inserted the blunt end into the hole, turned the handle not half a crank, until she grabbed it and slammed it down on her desk and shouted loudly, "I said no, Nancy." Some children cry, but I never did. I always froze, became numb with fear. In that condition, humiliated, I returned to my seat, and the girl across the aisle, Paulette, God bless her, passed a pencil to me. Decades later, I was guest conductor at a concert held in a local church. Their bulletin listed the newly chosen vestry, Star Newworth's name, along with the others. I wonder if she's here, was my very first thought. And even though it had been 40 years, I briefly experienced a numbing fear.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's so interesting, Nancy. How many people have said, it's hard to bring memories up, but then everybody comes up with a new memory, and they're all important memories. There's stuff that's
it was so interesting to see her name on that odd bulletin that was left in the room, after their service. Right. I thought, well, who would have thought? But anyway, that's it.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for sharing that, Nancy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Nancy Tunnell with Sense Memory.
Also, the little girl's kindness passing the pencil lives on.
That was so sweet. It does, yeah. Let's go to Audrey Friedman next.
Hi.
Hi, Audrey.
Hey, Audrey. Great to see you.
Oh, good to be here always. Okay, here we go. I had a conversation with a cousin of mine the other night, and I said, oh my God, I sound like a fortune cookie with the advice that I gave her. And so somehow it found its way into this poem. Baggage. My husband, gallantly lifting my suitcase into the car, looked at me with a puzzled expression. Yes, I knew he'd soon catch on that it was significantly heavier than it was on the way out to Arizona. What did you do? Put rocks in? At which point I burst into laughter. But of course I did. I had to. All those red rocks Sedona is so famous for, I need to bring them back for display in my classroom. Thank goodness the airlines didn't weigh luggage then or add a surcharge. They just put a tag on for the safety of the baggage movers. Heavy. No more carrying rocks from yesterday into tomorrow.
Yeah, really cool poem. Great memory.
Really nice, yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Audrey.
You.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Audrey Friedman with Baggage.
Honestly, kind of good that there's the weight limit on rocks, like when we were at the Grand Canyon or whatever. Lizzie kept picking up rock after rock, and it's like we can't just take all the rocks.
That is true. The planes would be sinking.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go to Sean Evidingo Sanders next.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Oh, great.
Hey, Sean, how are you?
So yeah, like everybody else, it was just kind of tough. I feel like I mine a lot of memories anyway when I write. So to come up with something that I haven't shared was unique. So what I'm going to share is actually a story that I've told many times to people, but there's a big chunk of it that I have not shared before.
Interesting take. Okay.
Why American tourists should never use Deutschmarks to buy Russian street art. Moscow, 1989. When the KGB first approach, we say what we were taught to say. Take us to the American embassy. Our request is met with insidious laughter of two burly men smelling of vodka. A black gloved hand laid upon my husband commands, "Come with us." It's like we've become two actors starring in a Cold War spy movie. The gray cement room, a light bulb flickering over a card table. The two of us restrained in metal folding chairs. I'm licking my lips, staring at a glass of suspicious water. How do you say, "I'm pregnant" in Russian? After debriefing in Stuttgart, John tells me how impressed they were with his calm handling of the encounter, that his skills could be beneficial to the government. They asked him if he'd consider becoming an American spy. And then he looks me dead in the eye. Of course, honey, I told them no. But then again, you'll never really know if that was actually my response. And just like that, I never fully trusted him again.
Oh, wow. Yeah. What an interesting place to go with that.
True story.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very interesting story. Yeah, I love all the juice we're getting today.
Yeah, we are. We're learning
Well,
things.
thanks for the great prompt again, Katie. You really make us stretch our writing. So I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for writing to us, Sean.
Yeah, thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, with Sean Evedingo Sanders with Why American Tourists Should Never Use Deutschmarks to Buy Russian Street Arts from Moscow, 1989. Yeah, interesting. Let's go next to Tina Denetclaw.
Okay, let's see.
Hey, Tina.
Hello.
Yeah,
You
here we
guys can-
are.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm more organized this time. I have to move my screens around because I like to see the people's poems. I like to see them printed because I understand them better when I can read them also.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's one of the reasons why we like it. You know, if you're only listening to Rattlecast, it's best to watch on YouTube. So, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I love to be able to see I learned so much from everybody's poems. So I've written something that sounds like something you wouldn't be a problem to share with people. But it's actually a situation where, you know, what came up for my husband. He was so brave, and it really helped me a lot. And he saw me as brave and also able to take care of whatever needed to be done. So that was important. So we didn't really talk a lot about what was going on for us. And then for my friends, you know, it just seemed ungrateful for me to talk about the experience when we were so lucky. So at any rate, that's what the poem is about. So I never really talked about it.
All right.
Okay. Pancreatic cancer likes to come back early if it's going to come back. The longer it is gone, the less chance you will see it again. By 2 years, there is very little chance it will return. The elderly doctor sat in for my husband's young radiation oncologist and knew what we needed to hear. Suddenly, we had a signpost. We were grateful for the chance to live, but did not know how long we would hold our breath, waiting for the unknown. Already 10 months on a dark, open road, stretching out in front of us, when that wise man showed us a mile marker. And now we are 2 months shy of that 2-year signal. We have not even a whisper from that deadly cancer. Today, I smiled softly, looking at my husband sitting in the car seat next to me. He returned my gaze with grateful calm. We shared together quiet joy for the now that we have.
No, that's really, really touching, and you know, such a thing to have to wait for. You know, like that, such open-ended waiting must have been really hard, and you really captured that. Thanks for sharing that, Tina.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. It's hard. So there's a picture that goes with it. Do you have time?
Yeah,
to show the
yeah,
picture?
right here. Yeah.
So last week's picture, I couldn't see it in time. That was taken at Barney's Burgers. We've been going there since 1983. He was wanting me to let him go ahead and eat rather than take his picture. So, so at any rate, this one at Cafe Raj this week, and he had already eaten, so he looked much more happy. Yeah, we've been going there since 1983 also.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, a long time. So there's so many.
Where is it you guys live, Tina? I don't remember.
So we're in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay.
So so for years, because these guys make rose lattes, which rose water, don't have anywhere else. And he wanted to have, a young man, he wanted to have burgers and beer all the time. So he always told me, I don't know where that is. And so for a long time, we didn't get to go. And he did the same thing for Cafe Fanny, which is the cafe named after Alice Waters. And he told me for years, I don't know where it is. And one day we were going down San Pablo Avenue, and I was saying, I'd like to go there. And he says, I don't know where it is. And I says, they have giant cups of coffee. He made a U-turn and he went right to.
That's funny. Well, that's a great story. We'll have to go, especially with a giant cup of
Well,
coffee.
there are a million reasons I want to go to an Alice Waters restaurant. It wouldn't have occurred to me to coffee, but
No, Alice Waters, the famous Chez Panisse. You should go. Cafe Fanny's closed.
Well, now I want to go.
Yeah, Chez Panisse, I would love to go to. I've
know what
read
you're-
books
you guys
about it.
speak a
We'll
different
talk more
language. I have
about
no idea what
this.
you're
I've
talking
read
about.
books about Alice Waters. Fascinating.
The reservation's way early, so you can
Yeah,
go.
it's really hard to get in.
Yeah. But
I
can
tried
do
to before my life and failed. Yeah.
You can do lunch upstairs with very little time ahead. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's
Well,
yeah.
Very interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that, Tina. We're
Thanks,
definitely
Tina.
going to check that out next time we're in the area. Thanks, Tina.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about my 3 minutes.
That was great.
Okay.
That was Tina Dennettclaw with a really touching poem. Pancreatic cancer likes to come back early. Next, let's go to Matt Joseph.
Hey there.
Hey, Matt. Great to
Guys.
see you.
Yeah, thanks so much. This is such a gift to have this every week. So this was actually great. This is a memory I've been carrying with me for a long time. And I've been wanting to write about for a long time. So this is a
That's
wonderful
great.
opportunity.
Yeah, great to give you the
So
inspiration to. Yeah.
great. So this is called Shotgun. It was me. I did it. A hand grenade whisper lobbed by my best friend. The broken children of fractured families, private school token lower middle class kids, codependently clinging to each other's hidden wounds and secret scars, since the rest of the world was a mustard gas fog bank that, as far as we cared, could softly fuck itself to sleep. Kind of best friend one has at 16 years old. Our school's vast new cafeteria window was now 1,000 glittering 1-carat diamonds, spread across the tables and floor, one well-hurled brick, guilty and alone, sitting in their midst, muttering, "Ain't this just a thing?" And, "Hey man, I just do what I'm told." I told no one, of course, through nothing, neither snitch nor rebel I. Sitting in the passenger seat, along for the ride, our getaway car fleeing down the 2-lane Michigan blacktop, faster than guilt, asphalt near melting from the tire spin, the roar of 17-year cicadas everywhere, ambient, almost louder than our laughter, vibrating at the very frequency of my bliss, to be traveling in that moment with someone wild and brave enough to burn it all down.
Oh, really interesting memory. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And that reminds me of a memory that I could have written about that I didn't. I have to write another poem.
Oh.
Yeah, well, that was a really interesting story. Thanks for sharing it, Matt.
Thanks you guys. Really appreciate this.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was Matt Joseph with Shotgun.
Matt has had one of the I think this is the 3rd week he's been here, and he's had a strong poem 3 weeks in a
Every
row.
week. I think Matt's officially a regular.
I know, he's already a regular.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Matt. Yeah, Matt Joseph with a Shotgun. Let's see. Don Caskey is up next.
Oops. There we go.
Hey, Don, great to see you.
What a tough assignment following Matt and Sean and Tina. Mine is much lighter. Mine's about a chance encounter on a sidewalk with a homeless man, and our tendency to assign divine reasons for chance encounters. The Pearl is the name of it. At dusk on the sidewalk in front of the CVS, I waited for my ride. A homeless man next to me lectured the lamppost about the meaning of life. At the height of his rambling rhetoric, the dark streetlight blinked and came on. We looked at each other with large, silly grins. I said, "Apparently someone was listening." He said, "But what now? What was it I said? A sermon, a song, a secret, a seed? Perhaps just a little pearl that I'll lay before you and walk away." He gave a slight bow and turned, adding over his shoulder, "Pardon me for intruding, sir. No offense intended." Still looking both ways for my way home, I said, "None taken. Please leave the light on."
Yeah, really interesting story. Thanks so much for sharing that, Don.
Thanks.
Yeah. That was Don Caskey with Pearl. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Don. All right, and then up next, we will have Michelle Mayer.
All right. Hi.
Hey, Michelle. Great to see you.
Hi. This is my first time.
Yeah, I thought so. You've been on the chat for a bit, so it's good to see you in person. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, I've been listening and observing for a while and chose a really hard one to join in on.
Well, good for you for challenging yourself. That's great.
I actually just said to my husband today, I said, so I have this memory and I feel like, I haven't shared it before because like the memories I don't choose to share, they're kind of traumatic or bad. So I'm going to add to that juicy trauma that you were referring to earlier.
It's really great to get it out, though.
Yeah,
there's so
it's
many,
important.
It really is. There's so many reasons just psychologically to get it off, and then put it in a container that's like outside of yourself.
Yeah.
And also connect address the things you haven't addressed about them too.
Yeah,
so we've seen that a bunch today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely true that I think when people do that, you make yourself vulnerable and you just connect with other people as well.
Yeah.
Of course, we all have it. So this is called In the Time of Happy Days. Like a set of keys, he tossed me onto the couch. 50 years later, I'm still grateful for those cushions. Stay here, he ordered. His face so close to mine that my eyes blurred. His blue-black hair was slicked back to look like the Fawn's. I wanted to ask him, what have I done? But I could only blink and nod. Maybe I hadn't done anything. Maybe he just resented the fact of me, that I existed at all. Little burden, little interruption. I remember the window, how it overlooked acres of pasture, how the sun touched my face as if it were summoned by my mother to watch over me while she and he made noise, made a baby that would never be born.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, what a great use of storytelling in that last line. Yeah. The way the whole poem turns on that. Yeah.
That's really powerful. Thanks for choosing to share it with us.
Thank you. Thanks for your prompts, Katie. They're always great.
Thanks,
Michelle.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. The Michelle Mayer. And where are you calling from, Michelle? I forgot to ask.
Well, right now, I'm actually in Durango, Colorado, because my husband and I are house and pet sitters, and we're house and pet sitting here in Durango.
Fun.
Yeah, that's
wow.
really cool.
We could get some call-ins from unusual places too.
Yeah, we will.
Michelle. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, very fun. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Michelle.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really moving poem. Yeah. It was Michelle Mayer with In the Time of Happy Days. Yeah, interesting title, too. Let's go next to Carlos Ornelas.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi, Carlos.
Great to see you.
Thank you. Okay. Kneel to the postman. Clowns stare at mirrors laughing till they are out of breath. Words are like jokes inside egg yolks, amusing ourselves to death. Monology, technopoly, incasts and outjections, subconscious approvals and conscientious objections, the beginning of ignorance and the end of education, the disappearance of childhood, the old man's imagination. I kneel to the postman that delivers his letters. The message received the perfect fit like knit sweaters. The megaforce of metaphors that hits just like a closed hand. A memory that teleports. First time I read the postman. And yeah.
Yeah, very
It's
interesting.
just,
That line, I kneel to the postman that delivers his letters. Yeah, very interesting poem. Thanks for sharing that, Carlos.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And that was Carlos Ornelas with, I guess, Kneel to the Postman, maybe we'll call it. Let's go to Carolyn Codd next.
Hello.
Hi,
Carolyn. Great to see you. I keep pushing the button. There you go. Hey, Carolyn. Great to see you.
Yep. My poem is from the week before, and I missed the time change, so I actually did have it ready last week. But anyways, it's the thing about allergy to something other than a person, and it starts out sounding like it's about a person, but it's not. And I would say that it's about absence and constancy, both.
Interesting.
I think it's kind of an elegy. So it's my guy
Okay.
He comes and goes with frequency, so I can't always see him. I miss him when he's gone, but still I'm glad to know him. He's a traveling man who'll be back soon. That's my guy, the man in the moon.
That's really fun. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, me
Carolyn.
either.
Yeah, fun poem.
Ever since I was very, very young, I've been fascinated by the moon. So it's one of the few real constants in my life, even though it comes and goes.
Yeah,
and
it really is.
It does come back.
Yeah, and how it never
Where
changes,
people
for
come
all
and
the
go, a lot of
generations over
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
They don't come back. So, and I do feel sad when he's gone, and I feel happy when I can see the moon. So.
Aw. That's really sweet. Well, thanks for sharing that, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
Carolyn Codd
you.
with My Guy. And next, let's go to Hammett Mullock.
Hi.
Hi,
Hey, Hammett. Yeah, thanks for your patience.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. I've got a Pantoum today,
Uh-huh.
but I think it might need a content warning. It's a heavy one as well.
Okay.
It refers to rape.
Yeah, okay.
The madness of silence. His eyes were wide with lunacy. His tongue a tail that swished his face, which thrust through his window at me. A standing on the toilet rape? His tongue told tales about his place. I hurried in to block my ears. I'd stood beneath their bedroom. Rape. Too terrified to interfere. I left the washing, blocked my ears. I hid behind the lounge room wall. My terror, trifling to her fears. Her bruises weren't from air assault. Her son walked stony, like a wall. Don't look at me, his bent head begged. Her face said, strangled, mute, assault. I don't know what her body said. No, your mercy I cannot beg. Only his thrusting to your pleas. Silence to what your body said. In those rooms wide with lunacy.
Wow, what a powerful poem. Heartbreaking story and really well wrought in that poem.
Yeah, really beautiful within the Pantoum
to
too.
remember.
Yeah. Tough memory for sure. And really, I mean, great use of the form, putting it to words.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks.
And the slight variations, you know, really were effective too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Hammett. Yeah, that was Hammett Mullock with The Madness of Silence. And now I believe last but not least on the line is none other than Carla Schwartz. Thanks for waiting, Carla.
Oh, thank you so much. So this prompt, I mean, I wrote actually a number of them, but the one that I sent to you tonight was definitely prompted by the prompt. But it's probably different than most of these, although I do fall into the club of using the word dialogue in my poem. But there is a little bit of dialogue in there, or the opposite of dialogue in there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then I don't know. I was watching, I think, a Zoom poetry thing, and I came across, and somebody presented this form, so this is a nonce version of this form, which is called a Haiku sonnet.
Oh,
I've not heard of that.
Yeah, me
That's
neither.
exciting.
And so the form is that the 4 tercets have 1 word, 2 words, and 3 words in them. And then there's a couplet at the end, okay? So very quick. Loud silence. What I couldn't say was that I'm sorry, though I hoped time would heal your heels dug in wound. You left no room for dialogue. Slammed into door, gray feathers, stunned turkey, no others.
Yeah, I love that no others at the end. Yeah. Loud silence, really interesting poem. And a really neat form too. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, and it is true. The lack of dialogue becomes a dialogue. I have to say that's accurate, very much so.
Yeah. Well, thanks
Thank
for
you
sharing.
both.
Yeah, thanks,
Thanks,
Carla.
Carla.
Yep.
Yeah, that was Carla Schwartz with Loud Silence. And I believe that's going to wrap up the Zoom for tonight. Let's see. Oh, what did I do? I like that my finger's a little too
A little cold
I don't
out
know.
today.
So maybe that's the
Yeah.
thing. All right. So let's see if probably Ted sent it. Yep, Ted's got a poem for us tonight. Let's do Ted's. I mean, he's got an interesting photo here. This is brings me back. This is like my childhood street, the snowy streets there of somewhere. And let's see what Ted's poem is. Susie and my Aunt Sonny, or Sunny. You say Sunny?
I think I'd say Sunny.
Sunny. Susie and my Aunt Sunny, like Sonny Bono.
Yeah.
All right. Susie and my Aunt Sunny. Winter sleet, 4 tires slushing among close-knit houses, not necessarily brownstone. I remember we were getting groceries on Kedvale Avenue in Poor Town, Chicago. It was dark and snowing, maybe rain. I was the proud owner of a new driver's license, maybe 2 months tops, and my aunt let me drive their Crown Victoria, gold in color. In the city, at night, in the gloom. Susie was in the back, talking her head off. I was the son of a favorite uncle, a favorite brother-in-law. Of course, the thrill of giving privilege, and the privilege of me driving behind any wheel. Winter sleet, 4 tires slushing, windshield not too clear when the wipers swiped from bottom to bottom. Winter sleet, 4 tires slushing, then a dry spell I felt on the pavement. It shocked me enough that I jerked the steer. Then bam, the Crown Vic connected. Susie became quiet in the back. I put on the brakes. Winter sleet, 4 tires, stopping. But my Aunt Sunny burst out, "Go, go, go!" So I did, and thus I hit, then split, leaving the winter sleet with 4 tires skipping responsibly. Yeah, what an interesting memory. Thanks for sharing that. And, that points out, though, Ted's a poet who usually writes, in different topics. So it's fun to hear a personal poem from Ted.
Yeah.
And it's nice that the prompts sort of move you around in different places like that. All right, thanks for sharing that. That was Ted Bernal Govera with Susie and my Aunt Sunny. All right, and that's going to wrap up the prompt lines for this week. Let's see, yeah. And the... let's see. And the Sciku is up next.
Yay, good.
That's what we do. And the Sciku is based on this story, which I found interesting. I actually didn't get this from some news, science listserv or anything. This is just in, I think, like on social media, somebody shared this article. This is interesting, though. It's from the University of Surrey. And the story is this. Physicists uncover evidence of 2 eras of time emerging from the quantum realm. And
that's
so,
quite the headline. You're going to have to break that one down for me, Green.
Well, I mean, it's always sort of a mystery that, time moves in one direction. That's the era of time. And yet the math of physics says it could go either way. And there's really no reason for it not to go the other way. And as we discuss here sometimes and things, there's retrocausality is a thing that happens. Like, you can, the path a photon chooses between slits can be determined by where it ends up in a weird way. And so, so could history be created by the present somehow is a real question. And in this study, which is a mathematical study, actually, they sort of stripped out, made a couple of base assumptions, and then they thought they were going to be showing that the physics at the quantum realm would only work in one direction. If they stripped out and sort of made it extra simple. They assumed that the universe was infinite and that any energy released would be absorbed, which makes the calculations kind of easier. And they thought that it would show that it had to work forward anyway. Turns out it can work backward too. And so there's sort of a mathematical model for retrocausality, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
A little bit. Not going to be in Lizzie's math lesson.
So no, well, I didn't read the actual paper. There's a summary, didn't really show anything, and the math's probably over my head too. But that was an interesting topic to think about. Always fun thinking about time moving backwards and how we can create the past with our memory, which is like relevant for today's episode.
Yeah, it is.
Keeps coming up. So the Sciku based on that is this right here. Where'd it go? There's my mouse. Rewriting the last line first, wedding day. There you go. Rewriting the last line first, wedding day. That is our prompt for this week, and that is the show for this week. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Now, your prompt next week, Katie, is what?
It is. We are going to write a poem that includes an unexpected vow.
Yeah.
So I'm cheating slightly on this because something Tim and I are going to be doing is writing our wedding vows because our wedding is in a week and a half now.
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to share our wedding vows. I don't know about you.
No, I ain't going to write something. That's expected, right?
Okay.
We're expecting. I'm expecting you to write your vows. We have agreed. We're expecting each other, so that wouldn't count. But an
That's
exploration of vows. And maybe I'll get some inspiration too from everybody's amazing poems that will undoubtedly be revealed next week with Bethany Jarmels as the guest.
Yeah, well, that's great. Yeah, so a week from Tuesday is our wedding day.
It's our wedding day.
Yeah. So anyway, but we're gonna be here for the Rattlecast. And
don't worry, we're not missing a single Rattlecast.
You're not. Although, oops, I did the thing again. But the critique of the week, though, we will. Missing a critique of the week for the honeymoon.
And possibly a poetry space.
And the poetry space. I know we're going to record two
trying
tonight.
to.
No. All right. Well, anyway, that's going to be the prompt for next week. Write a poem that includes an unexpected vow. And the guest for next week, you already know, it's no surprise. So big reveal, blah, 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 is Bethany Jarmel. And Bethany, as we shared, has a new book out, Lightning is a Mother. You know Bethany from being here a lot on the open lines, on the prompt lines as time has gone on. A great supporter of the poetry community. She does a lot of workshops, a lot of social media presence, sharing other people's work and things. And she's going to be sharing her book, Lightning is a Mother. That's next week, Rattlecast 282 with Bethany Jarmel. The regular time, Sunday, February 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, with your poems about unexpected vows. Looking forward to that. We hope you have a great week in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Good night.
Good night.